Perfect. All right. So, exercise the good, the bad, and the ugly. Again, I am Zach Horowitz, and we are going to go ahead and get started. So, a little icebreaker here. I just want to get everyone engaged a little bit. So, what is everyone's favorite exercise activity or sport to do, or watch, or play, or hope to play soon, or used to play someday in the past? What do we got? Go ahead and throw that in the chat. All right, so we have hiking, basketball, running. Very cool. Very cool. For me, it would probably be weightlifting. Oh, more running. Very cool. Nature. Yeah, I agree with that. I really like nature as well. I did a 14er maybe a year or so ago, and I was like, wow, that was mix of hiking and nature, right? Oh, very cool. Which one did you do? Quandary. Nice. I did Mount Sherman, but that one is on the list for me. Very cool. Well, thank you all. We'll go ahead and get moving on here. So, getting right into it, today we're going to cover just a few different areas here. We're going to talk about what is exercise, what kind of counts as exercise, different types of exercise. We want to look at why exercising matters, and then we'll kind of finish it all off with how you can get started. Whether that's starting for the first time or first time in a while, right? We'll kind of get into that later, but let's go into what we think of when we hear the word exercise. Do we hear 2 hours in the gym, running 5Ks or more every day, lifting weights until you can't bend your arms, right? Or do we think of getting more steps in or staying active throughout the day? A lot of us have very sedentary jobs and sedentary lifestyles, and maybe we just need to get moving more throughout the day and having fun, right? Exercise doesn't have to necessarily be bad; it could be fun, and so those are kind of just to show the back and forth, the extreme versus the less extreme reality of what exercise could be. But really, what counts as exercise is anything. We could have your typical things like lifting weights, running, biking, right? Those are things that we probably think of, maybe swimming. But it doesn't have to be so black and white like that. We can also think of things like walking, not even on an incline treadmill, but even something like just getting your steps in for the day, right? I'm sure everyone hears about, oh, you got to get your 10,000 steps in for the day, which that isn't necessarily true for everyone, right? Maybe you need 8,000, 6,000. Some people are, high achievers and get 15 or 20. That's just to show the range, the wide variance in what people can do. And there's also sports, right? Exercise doesn't have to be, like I was saying, black and white, like running or biking. It could be, basketball. It could be soccer, football. We could think of games. Think back to when you were a kid, and when you played Foursquare or Duck Duck Goose, right? Those are forms of exercise, even though it's portrayed in a way to be fun, right? So exercise doesn't have to be so black and white. It can be fun and somewhat relaxing to a degree. And so with that, I kind of want to talk about types of exercise. I like to think that there are two main kinds. There's cardiovascular exercise and resistance or resistance training, I should say. And that's going to be like your weightlifting. But with cardiovascular,
Alyssa.
oh, for cardiovascular, it's in the name cardio. I'm sure we all hear, you got to do your cardio, right? And so this is going to be an aerobic type of training, aerobic, which means it uses oxygen to function. So when we're running, biking, swimming, doing these consistent movements, right? These you may be running or biking for 10, 20, 40 minutes, right? That's that continuous motion. That's going to be our aerobic type of training that utilizes oxygen as an energy source. Uh, Conversely, with resistance training, these are you typically not continuous motions. These are, you do your sets and reps, right? You do a few reps with your weights and then you put them down and you take a minute off, you rest, right? Then you pick them up again, another minute or so of lifting, and then you drop them, right? This is anaerobic training. This does not utilize oxygen. It utilizes a different system in our body. Not going to get into that today. It's just a little intense for what we're going over here. But all that to say is it uses a different system, and these are the two main types of training that we could typically do on a day-to-day basis. So a little poll for you all, and you can throw this in the chat. Which training style is better? Is one better than the other? If so, which one? Do we have any guesses?
I think maybe strength or maybe both.
I think strength, maybe both. Balance of both, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. Well, they both have their advantages. Yes, I agree. And trick answer, they're both great. Hey, we should all be doing both cardio and resistance training. They're both great. They both provide different benefits, and I think it's great for everyone to do both. There are various recommendations from the ACSM, which is the American College of Sports Medicine. And if any of you were at my last Lunch and Learn presentation, I talked about this just a little bit, I believe at the end there. But for our cardiovascular training, they recommend 150 minutes per week of moderate to vigorous activity. And then for resistance training, we're looking at training each muscle group twice, 2 times per week, 10 to 20 sets, again, per week. So, I believe last presentation, I used this squat example. I'll go back to that one again. We want to think about, the squat is going to work your legs, right? So if we think about the quadriceps, the muscle on the front side of our legs, that muscle, if we do 5 sets of squats on Monday, you do 5 more on, say, Thursday, right? And now you're at 10. That's in that range of their recommendations. And then same thing like for the cardio, 150 minutes, you could split that up 5 days of 30 minutes of activity, right? Or if you want to split it up again, that can be broken down into 15 minutes 2 times a day. The guidelines don't necessarily state that it has to be all at once, right? You can break these up to make it fit into your daily schedule. So moving on from that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the short-term effects that you may experience from exercising, and then we're going to get also into some more long-term effects. But these are some of the short-term effects you may experience. So the first one is the delayed onset of muscular soreness or muscle soreness. And in the fitness world, I've heard it called many times DOMS, right? And basically that's the phenomenon of you go lift weights and then you wake up the next day and you're sore. And then the next day comes and you're even more sore than the day before. Well, there's actually a reason for that. And it all has to do with the immune system in your body. So when we're lifting weights, we're breaking down that muscle tissue, right? We're kind of destroying muscle tissue, breaking that up and getting it all inflamed and riled up, right? And what happens is over the course of the next day or two, it's actually like a 72-hour period just on the short side of things. And then it extends even further than that. But just within the first 2 days, what's happening is our immune system is reacting to this muscle damage, and it's sending out immune cells to go and take out the bad broken bits and go and repair our muscles. And more or less, that's how we get stronger. That's how we increase our muscle size, right? That's what the delayed onset of muscle soreness is. That's why we experience that feeling 2 days later, even though we worked out, 48 hours prior. Getting ripped. Yes, exactly. Yes. That's the goal, right? Um, but that's just for lifting weights in that repairing of the damage that we create. We also can experience fatigue. We can feel nauseous, right? I remember I used to play lacrosse, and I remember many practices where our coach did a number on us, and I remember feeling, oh, that my apologies. There we go. I remember feeling somewhat nauseous after doing lots of sprints, and not to say that everyone must be sprinting and trying to achieve this nauseous feeling or this feeling of fatigue, but just to say that you may experience this, especially if it's been a while. And same thing with feeling lightheaded. If you don't run often and you go give it a shot one day, you may end your run with that like kind of lightheaded, maybe slight like pounding feeling, right? Um, and that's partly due to those like endorphin release that you get. They call it like the runner's high, right? Partly due to that and cause of that. But just to say that these are all things that our body adapts to. So our bodies like to adapt to normalcies. So if we make these four things, right, we lift weights, we go running, biking, whichever type of exercise you'd like to put in there. If you do this consistently, you know, maybe day after day, week after week, your body will get used to it. If you do squats 2, 3 times a week, at a certain point, there may be times when you don't become sore after. And that's not to say that your squats didn't matter or didn't do anything, but just that you'll more or less be used to that feeling, and you won't get that sore feeling as intense as the first time you do it. And same goes for these, this fatigue, this nausea, right? Moving on, we'll go into some long-term effects. So the previous slide was talking about things that happen, day of, day right after, right? But these are broader scale, more long-term effects that are probably more beneficial than they are harmful. The previous one was kind of more like annoyances, right? But these things are going to be good things that we want. So we're going to talk about our cardiovascular system, right? That's going to be our heart and our blood pumping. We're going to talk about respiratory, our lungs, our daily energy levels, our musculature, um, the way our bones work, as well as just general fitness, right? Our overall fitness day to day. So let's go ahead and get into it. So long-term effects. We'll start with cardiovascular, like I pointed out. So to have a better cardiovascular system, you must train your cardiovascular system. That's going to be our running, biking, swimming, etc. Right? And what this can do is actually lead to hypertrophy of the heart. And I know it's a large word, but what that means is enlarging, where we're growing the size of our heart. Um, and this is going to actually help with our performance and efficiency. And one of those is stroke volume, another kind of larger concept there. But stroke volume of our heart, that more or less, all that is to say is how much blood can fit in our heart when it's contracting and pumping, right? And so the more you can get in and out, the more efficient it is at working. And we need this for oxygen delivery during exercise, especially during those cardio aerobic movements, right? So we want this. We want a hypertrophy of the heart. We also want it's beneficial to have an increase in our stroke volume. And with this, with more efficient stroke volume, more efficient contracting and pumping of the heart, right, can allow for our resting heart rate to actually go down. It can decrease, and it's typically better to have a lower heart rate than a higher one, right? If you take the average person and you say, "Oh, would you rather have a higher heart rate or a lower?" It would definitely be better to shoot for the lower heart rate, resting, that is. Um, and with cardiovascular, the heart right nearby it, just around the corner, we have the respiratory system. That's going to be our lungs. That's our breathing, right? So in our respiratory system, in our lungs, I should say, we have these hard to pronounce word, alveoli. These are little air sacs. So if you think of your lungs, you may just think of like a blob that sits in your chest cavity, which is kind of true. It is just a blob or two blobs. But when we're inhaling, we're not just expanding those blobs, right? Those organs. There's actually tons of little sacs that are in there, all different sizes and tons of them. And so by uh, performing cardiovascular exercise, by training aerobically, we can actually increase these numbers and size of them. We can make these little air sacs more efficient. At every time you inhale, they are better at opening up and allowing air to get in both quicker and to allow that oxygen transfer, right? Um, along with that, in our respiratory system, we have our increased diaphragm strength, right? That's our that whole midsection in that rib cage. The stronger our diaphragm is, the better we can be at inhaling, right? Um, the more efficient you are at inhaling, the more efficient you can be at utilizing those nutrients like the oxygen and just the air that you intake, right? You need that while you're running, biking, swimming, etc. And in that diaphragm, with that, we have these intercostal muscles or respiratory intercostal muscles. Those are the muscles that are in between our ribs on our rib cage, and that's going to support the strength in our diaphragm. And just kind of like I was saying with increasing your diaphragm, being able to expand more, you can take in more air and be able to utilize that more efficiently. So it's definitely beneficial to increase the strength of these. Moving on from cardio and respiratory, more into energy and musculature. So for energy, we our aerobic system can become more efficient by training our aerobic system, right? Kind of cause and effect, logical there. And our body can also become more tolerant to that lactic acid. Just like I was saying with those, that feeling of fatigue, that nausea, the delayed onset of muscle soreness, our body becomes tolerant to the pressure that we put upon it. And I'll bring that up again in just a minute here. But that feeling when you're running and your legs are burning, it's killing you. It really sucks, right? Um, our body can become tolerant to this and actually somewhat resistant, and that's how people can end up running for hours on end, right? We hear these ultra marathon runners who run for 5, 8, 10 hours, right? They're just resistant to this lactic acid buildup, that sensation that you feel when it burns really bad. Um, and with our musculature, we get our hypertrophy. I believe that's a word I've thrown around a little bit. So our muscles will actually grow, and with that size comes strength. Both in a training sense is beneficial, but also day to day life. As we get older, and I talked about this in my last presentation also, we need this strength to, bend down and pick things up, to find something on top of the fridge, right? We need these strength. We need this strength to live a happy, healthy life. And with the muscles, we don't just want to strengthen, the fancy parts on our body. We need our tendons and ligaments. These are the pieces that are connecting your muscle to the bone, right? Our muscles don't just sit there like loosely sloshing around in space. They're attached, and they're attached to bones. And so that's what we need, these tendons and ligaments to more or less catch up in strength with our muscles. Because if our muscles outdo our tendons, ligaments, that's when you can risk, muscle tears and pulling your muscle and it hurts and things like that. There's not a lot that you can necessarily do to strengthen your tendons or ligaments without training your muscles. Think of your Achilles tendon on the back of your heel there, or like on the back of your ankle. You can't necessarily train that without training your calf muscles. So I would say to get these going, you kind of just have to train the muscles they're connected with. So it kind of goes hand in hand. I just wanted to point that out though. And so last little section here, We're going to look at our skeletal parts of our body, the bones, right? And then general fitness. So bone density, very important. And exercise plays a large role in bone density. I talked about Wolff's Law last time, and I want to bring it up again. Wolff's Law states that our bones adapt to the load that we place upon them, right? So again, with that squat example, by squatting, we are putting load on our femur, the bone in our thigh, right? We're putting load on our tibia and fibula, and that's gonna actually increase bone density. And doing so has multiple benefits. Decreases the risk of osteoporosis, right? That's when our bones become brittle, and it happens as we get older, especially in women. And then with that, we can reduce the risk of fractures, sprains, falling, bones just breaking, stuff like that. So it is very important to worry about our bone density, and especially resistance training helps with that a lot. And then, kind of to conclude this little section here, looking at fitness, just general fitness, by training both cardiovascularly and resistance training, we can increase our flexibility. We can have greater speed and performance, not just in our activity of choice, but in just our daily activities, right? Just by doing some cleaning around the house, mowing the lawn, things like that, right? And then same thing with reduced fatigue of muscles, and with that the delayed onset of muscle soreness. We by training consistently and regularly, our muscles will be more efficient and we'll be better at utilizing them. So all in all, there's a lot of long-term effects that are very good. And so by doing both resistance and cardiovascular training, we can actually get all of these. So how do you get started? This may be starting today, starting tomorrow. Maybe you used to exercise, but it's been a while. Best things to do is to start slow. You want to start slow, right? You don't want to get into, if you haven't ran in 10 years, you probably don't want to run more than like half a mile to a mile. And keep it simple. It doesn't have to be this crazy, weird plan you saw on Instagram one time. It could just be run once a week, twice a week, right? To get started. And like I'm saying, that run once or twice a week, we want to aim for consistency. Being consistent is more important than training really hard, at least at the beginning for a while. And the last important thing for this is to make it fun. If you don't enjoy an exercise, you're most likely going to hate it and not ever want to do it again. And so by picking an exercise you enjoy, it will make you be more consistent, and it'll allow you to do something that's simple and still keeping it fun, right? So by keeping it simple, something I learned, and I think this is a great tool that everyone can utilize, is using SMART goals. These are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And all that is to say that you want a specific goal. So instead of just saying, I want to get into running, think, my specific goal is to run a 5K, right? But you're not just going to run a 5K tomorrow. You need to make it measurable. So you're going to count up the different steps. I'll start by running a quarter mile. And then maybe in a week or two, you run half a mile. And then after that, a mile, right? So we have these different steps, something you can see time after time and be able to measure out on a timeline, right? Actually achievable and realistic. Are you actually going to run a marathon? Probably not. Maybe. If you are, great. But shoot for something you might actually do and want to do, right? And timely. If you are shooting to run a marathon, you're probably not going to try to run a marathon in a week. You probably need 6 months to a year or longer of training to get to that point, right? So think of these SMART goals, easy to remember. And so this is kind of like a sample starter plan. These, of course, don't follow those guidelines that I outlined earlier. But if you aren't exercising now, and this is something that you may want to get into, you could try resistance training twice a week, Shoot for, maybe 20 minutes, somewhere right in there in that 15 to 30. And I think maybe 2 full body workouts would be sufficient to start. So we want to hit all the major muscle groups, both above and below our waistline. As for cardio, take your pick. Maybe you want to go for a light jog, um, or bike, or do all three, or even more. 2 to 3 times per week. Maybe start easy, 20, 30 minutes a piece, and then add some stretching in. Maybe just in the morning when you wake up, or just before bed. Maybe just a couple times a week, right? 5 minutes will make more of a difference than 0 minutes, right? So, easy way to get started. And then after you do this for a little bit, then you can progress up to those guidelines that I mentioned earlier, that 150 minutes, those 2 times a week, 10 to 20 sets, right? So, just some way to think about it. And that is all for today. Do we have any questions? If so, just put those in the chat here.
Zach, I'm going to come off mute. I do have a question about starting slow with resistance training. How many sets would you recommend somebody does with an exercise if they're just starting out? And how many exercises in general should they do in a workout?
Well, that's very case dependent, of course. I think if you're just starting out, you could do anywhere from 2 to 5 exercises, maybe 3 to 5, we'll say. And then, what was the first part of that?
Just how many sets, like if you're
Mm.
doing squats, how many sets would you recommend?
To start out, I think, like, if you're following that, that sample thing that I was saying, where just starting out, I'd say like 2 sets per thing, and then you can progress up from there, maybe up to 3 to 5 sets after you've done that for a little bit. So I'd say 3 to 5 exercises per workout, and then maybe 2 to 3 sets maximum just to start, and you can progress up slowly. Yeah, good question. Any other questions? All right. Well, if not, thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day. And do I have videos of resistance training? I don't personally have videos of resistance training. Um, I don't personally have videos, but there are so many on YouTube. That's actually how I got started in fitness, by watching YouTube videos. So I'd recommend going on there, and just probably the highest viewed video, anything that has, espresso. Yes. I actually am not sure if we have. I'm pretty sure there should be some videos on there. I'll take a look at that here in a bit. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining. I do have one more presentation coming next week on Wednesday again. So if you're interested in learning a little bit about behavior change, and associating that with exercise, tune in for that at the same time. Thanks so much, and I'll see you all then.